Welcome to Cooking from the Cave. I'm Chef Pete Truziak, and today we're going to be making some meatballs and rigatoni pasta. These meatballs are going to be a little bit larger than your normal standard size, but let's just get into this recipe. I have a mixture of pork and ground beef. I'm going to incorporate my 2 eggs to this mixture. And meatballs are pretty much made the same way, it's just what you put into them will change the flavor profile. So basically everything's going to get mixed together. I got my seasonings. This is salt, smoked paprika, red pepper flakes, and then black ground pepper. I got my breadcrumbs. These are fresh ground breadcrumbs. And we just processed these in the food processor earlier today. 1 cup of whole milk. I'm not going to add all of it at once because I want to see how the breadcrumbs absorb and soak everything up. And then I have, I'm going to need about 5 cloves of garlic. I have a full head of garlic minced up here because we're going to use the rest of this for our red roasted tomato sauce that we'll be doing in a little bit. At this point, let me get a spatula on the side here, but we're just going to get our hands dirty and mix this all up together. Your consistency is going to start off very wet, but as those breadcrumbs absorb all of the ingredients in here, that milk, the eggs, the seasonings, it's going to dry out, and you're basically going to need to make sure that you don't make this too wet or too dry. If it does appear too wet so that you still see milk around the edges, add a little bit more breadcrumbs. If it's dry, I mean, it doesn't look like you've added any liquid, just toss in a little bit more milk. Alright, now because we've added milk, we're not going to have that bright red color that we normally get when you think of ground beef. And that pork kind of mellows it out too, so you almost get that pink color. Now, the next step here is, one, make sure that you can form it into a ball, which we can. And we're going to make these a little bit larger than normal and make them into tennis ball size. And the next step is to fry these in the pan and then throw them in the oven. Our meatballs are made. At this point, we probably all made meatballs at one point in our life. I think it's the first thing I remember watching my mom make as a little kid. She would make them. She would make smaller size, maybe golf ball sized ones, and put them into the refrigerator or freezer and freeze them, and then pull them out and cook them. The reason why you see a lot of recipes do that is so that the binding agent, meaning your breadcrumbs and your eggs, have time to work and keep everything together. It's also something you can do way ahead of time. Make a big batch of these, freeze them, and then pull them out as you need them. And then my mom would freeze them on flat plates, and then she could pull out what she needed as she saw fit for our family. At this point, though, we're not going to refrigerate ours. We're just going to go ahead and start cooking them because it's getting close to dinner time. What we're going to need to do is heat our pan up. I have our pan at medium heat right now. I'm going to go ahead and put olive oil in the pan. I'm going to put enough so that I'm able to fry just the outside of the meatball. Again, I want to make sure that oil gets hot before I do anything, but we're going to roll the meatball in that oil so then it caramelizes the entire outside. Then we're going to pull them out, put them in our roasting pan, and bake them in the oven at 350. Alright, our oil is heating up. I'm going to try one out. I'm just going to drop it in the pan, see if anything happens. If it starts to bubble around the surface, which it is. So we can go ahead and start adding our other ones. And remember, as you add more and more to the pan, it's going to cool it down, so you may have to increase your heat a little bit, depending on how many meatballs or what you're cooking, because you don't want that oil to cool down too fast. And that sizzle is also a good sound. I'm going to tilt that pan so that oil runs nice and smoothly over the entire pan itself. That's where that spatula comes in handy, because as it caramelizes on one side, then we're going to kind of roll or push that meatball to the next side and the next side and the next side. This might take a few minutes to get all the sides coated. The caramelization, the meatballs are nice and brown now. We can move them over to our roasting pan. They don't have to be perfect on all the sides, but you just want to make sure you get enough color on them so that that color will eventually make the meatballs a little bit sweeter because of the caramelizing that occurs. The natural sweetness from the food comes out. And I'm using this pan to make our sauce in as well because, one, my son loves having the little bits of meat left in the pan with his pasta sauce and everything. So we're going to use this for our sauce as well. I'm going to transfer these into the oven. Probably give them about 15 minutes. I think I rolled on me. About 15 minutes in the oven at 350. We'll check them, and while that's going, we can make our sauce. I haven't turned the heat down. It's still medium heat. Got all those nice bits of ground beef in the pan and everything. We're going to add 1 yellow onion. I like to use yellow over white because yellow has a little bit more flavor. It's also a little sweeter. And again, a very traditional thing is to add some sugar to the sauce. If you use the right ingredients at the forefront of it, and if you treat them properly, like you caramelize them, you brown them up, you're not going to have to add that sugar at the end to sweeten up your sauce. So we're going to use a sweet onion. You could even use Vidalia if you had it, if they were in season. This is your traditional Spanish. Let these sweat a little bit. They're going to turn light brown, and then we'll start adding more ingredients. Our onions have changed colors. We can go ahead and add our garlic. Everybody in the family smells the ground beef cooking in the ovens from this, and so now we're visited by dogs and cats, and my son's wondering when dinner is. We're going to add our spices now. It really starts to smell good. I add my dried spices at the beginning so that they have time to bloom in the sauce. If you add them at the end, you're just going to be tasting this dryness that you don't want, so add it at the beginning. Anytime you're using any dried spice, just as a rule of thumb, make sure you give yourself about 30 minutes cooking over some type of heat, whether it's even low heat, just so that it releases the natural flavors that it's looking for. We're going to stir this for about a minute now. And it's okay if it darkens a little bit. You'll begin to smell garlic, you'll begin to smell those herbs. We're going to add a can of fire roasted tomatoes. These are diced up. And I'm going to stir these into the onions and the garlic. And fire roasted tomatoes, you can make these at home, but if you're cooking this in the wintertime, just buy the good canned fire roasted tomatoes. There's many different varieties out there. It'll just really develop and give your sauce much more depth. Then we're going to use 2 cans, 2 of the big cans, the 28-ounce cans of the diced tomatoes. Incorporate those as well. I don't use paste in my sauce, and the reason for that is because the pasta is going to absorb a lot of that liquid when it's all said and done. So I want this to be a little bit looser than if you watch the pizza episode. I want it to be a little bit looser than my pizza sauce. At this point, we're going to let it come up to a boil, and the boil is going to be real simple. We're just going to look for a little bubbling in the middle, which it is. I'm going to give it a stir. Just monitor it. Still getting some more bubbles. Stir it a little bit more, and now I'm going to reduce my heat back down to a medium. That's it. I just want, the reason why I bring it up to a boil is so that all the flavors have time to be released together. They can combine in the sauce, maybe a minute at most. Now we're going to drop our heat down to a medium, and we're going to just let that simmer. While that's simmering, we can start our water for our pasta. And our meatballs are still roughly about 10 minutes away from being done in the oven, so we have plenty of time to let all these flavors develop. It's 20 minutes in now, and our meatballs are done. I took an instant read thermometer just to make sure that our temperatures were good. We're looking at wanting the meatballs to be right around 145 to 150 because we want to cook that pork all the way through. Our sauce is cooking. It's reduced a little bit, which is totally expected. Our pasta's boiling right now. What I want to do is I want to go ahead and take the meatballs out of the roasting pan, drop them into the sauce, and we can go ahead and actually just let them cook a little bit longer in the sauce. And you can do that either on the stove or you can do that in the oven. So I do want to coat them. So we're going to roll them around in this sauce. And what I also like to do is I'm going to add a little bit of Romano cheese. It's kind of a little treat of my mom. She loves Romano cheese. So this one's for you, Mom. And I'm going to add that right to my sauce. Roughly about 2 tablespoons worth. But again, being part Italian, I'm not really going to measure anything when it comes to making sauce. And there will be that debate whether it's called sauce or gravy. I will let you guys decide if what we will call this, but I will call it sauce for this episode. Let that just simmer on the stove a little bit more. We'll come back once our pasta's cooked and we'll finish this dish up for the family. Our pasta is fully cooked, and the way we're going to plate this up is I'm going to put a nice bed of pasta down first. Shake off any excess water. And then we're going to plate up our meatballs and sauce. A word about the sauce is I haven't really done any seasoning to it yet except for the dried herbs at the beginning and Romano. Definitely taste it at this point. And everyone's family's a little bit different. Mine, we're okay with having it chunky. If you want to do a thinner sauce before putting the meatballs in, but after cooking it, put it in a blender and puree it up so it's nice and smooth. You don't have to pass it through any strainer or anything. Just puree it up so that you get some of these bigger chunks of tomato out of here. But again, if your family's okay with the country style sauce, a little bit thicker, then that's fine too. It tastes good. There's not a need for a lot of, because the garlic and those dried herbs are coming through, there's not a need for a lot of salt, so I'm just putting maybe a teaspoon. The spice from the meatballs, the paprika and the red pepper flakes is coming through nicely too. So we're going to put some pepper in there, but not a lot again. And at this point, we can start plating this up. And I'm going to do this with the meatballs first, sauce on top. And we're going to have a wonderful looking dish. One more meatball out of there. There you go. I didn't think it would fit in this dish, but we got all the meatballs, the pasta, and the sauce. Enjoy this with your family for a great get-together, maybe at a holiday or something like that. Thanks for joining us from Cooking from the Cave. I'm Chef Pete Truziak, and Mom, this one's for you.